Greetings, everybody. Here we are, 7 p.m., almost on the dot, maybe a minute or two behind. We'll give everybody a moment here to jump online. Chris, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Why are we a little late again?
I had to do my makeup. I had to do my hair. Get prepared.
No, happy birthday to everybody. Let's see, and let me get on my phone and I'll share this.
Yeah, go ahead and share. Anybody who wants to share. And if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in. It's Sunday evening. I mean, why watch 60 Minutes when you can watch this compelling social media programming, if you will. Can everybody hear us okay? Hopefully that's the case.
My phone, it says, ask Derek a question now.
Yeah, we can hear. Well, I mean, yeah, you can. If somebody wants to ask a question now or later, they can. All right, we've got a few people joining us here, and
it's basically my parents and you and I.
It's a good start. It's a firm foundation. We'll go from there. So anyway, welcome everybody. We're back with Chris. You know, we had a great conversation yesterday with Charmaine McGuffey, running for Hamilton County Sheriff, and I know Charmaine is a friend of yours, Chris, as well.
Yep,
so it was a great, yeah, she'll be great, and it was a great conversation. And one of the things that I really like to do with this medium, and really just when I interact with people in general, I always like to know, even like watching a movie, watching a TV show, I like to know the backstory. That's my favorite part of a TV show, when they go into the 10 years in the past. I'm watching Ozark right now, and I'm a part in the first season.
For my parents. Yep.
Yeah, and it's a great. Jason Bateman is awesome in the show, I think. But they go and do the backstory, and then it kind of is instructive about how you got here, how we got here, and how that the history shapes not only the future but the present where we're at. And so right. They're not originally from, and I think most people know that are joining us here that we've been friends for a while. We could talk about the first time we met. It was kind of cool. I can't believe it's been about 10 years now.
Yeah.
Just about to the day. But
yep.
You're not originally from Cincinnati, from the Louisville area. And so can you just, I'm sure some people know your background, but for those that join us or tune in later, how'd you get here? And then we'll talk about your career on council, and then moving forward to today, what are the issues facing the city right now in these uncertain times that we have with Corona and so forth. So that's just a quick intro for everybody.
So the question is, how did I get to Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, just and then we'll talk about we talk about what we're doing to spend our days today and stuff like that. But how did you travel the long and winding road from Louisville upstream up to Cincinnati and get here, and now you're on council?
Yeah, so I mean, I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, actually a suburb of Louisville, in a neighborhood called Pleasant Ridge Park. But before that, so my parents, both German backgrounds. My dad was raised in Shively, Louisville, which is a city of its own. And his dad, my grandfather, who I share a birthday with, was a city council member in Shively, Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was raised in Germantown or Schnitzelburg, the German area of Louisville. They met over CB radios. This was part of my stump speech.
Not two tin cans and a string back in the day?
No, so my mom's name was Sugar Booger, and my dad's name was Mighty Mouth on CB radios. And so, they were together when they were 15 and 16, and they're still together now today, some 40, 50. No, they're in their 60s. I don't know. So anyway, so they got married when they were 24-ish and had me when they were about 25-ish. I was raised in a middle-class neighborhood, amazing people all around us, lifelong friends who my parents and I still hang out with and travel with today.
Mm-hmm.
Was raised Catholic, went to Catholic grade school, high school, went to St. X in Louisville. While I was in high school, you start thinking about where you're going to go to college. And I knew that I wanted to go to a smaller school But also I wanted to probably get out of Louisville, have that experience of not being in the same city as your parents and kind
Right.
of growing up that way. So um, actually, it was down to two colleges, and they couldn't have been more different. And actually, I had a bumper sticker because my first choice for a long time was Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Um, but at the last minute, decided that I wanted to go to a school that was at a bigger city, that was in an urban area. And so that's what led me to Xavier. And so in 1998, I moved here to go to Xavier University.
Wow, fantastic, and you've been here ever since. And I think it's pretty clear to say that Cincinnati's your adopted hometown.
Now, I've been here longer than
No.
I was in Louisville. Yeah.
And me as well. I'm not originally from here, and have adopted Cincinnati. And sometimes we hear about, well, I don't know how welcoming this place is, or people ask you where you went to high school and those types of things. For me, at least, I think that's maybe kind of an old wives' tale, maybe a little bit more overblown than what the reality is. I think one of the great things that I love about this city, in that it's a major league town. You go places, people have heard of Cincinnati, and obviously people know the Reds and the Bengals and those types of things, and much about our culture here. But by the same token, it's a small it's a small big town. It's not New York or Chicago or LA or Atlanta, places like that. But I think that's a real benefit that we have here, because somebody like yourself, like myself, and others come to mind, where you don't necessarily have to have a name here, or be particularly wealthy, or super connected. There's the opportunity here, because that it's a smaller area, a smaller city, to really get engaged, and to really play a role. And so, for example, if you were to just move to New York, the likelihood of you ever running for council and getting elected is probably pretty slim, right? Unless you're somehow coming up through the channels and the networks there.
Speaker of the House, Corey Johnson, who is openly gay, and it's second most powerful person in New York, is not from there and moved to New York with only a suitcase, a couple of decades ago. So I don't know. I think that the majority of the cases are people who have long roots in the cities, but there are
Right.
exceptions.
Yeah, yeah. And so certainly we have the opportunity to do that here, and I think that's one of the great things about our city, is that you can get involved and engaged, and and really move the needle, and make an impact. So you went to so you were at Xavier for undergrad, correct?
Right.
And then kind of where did that lead after that? And then ultimately, I think your entree into politics was with our former vice mayor, David Crowley. And so how did that story go? And you went to law school as well?
Yeah, I love seeing Lauren Altman said I met you at Xavier volunteering on the John Kerry campaign, which was in 2004. I've always been interested in politics, and luckily my parents, were always voters and always Democratic voters, and raised me. I remember going to the polls with my parents and voting in Louisville. So yeah, I went to Xavier. I was involved there. I started the first Gay Straight Alliance at a Catholic university. We passed the first welcoming statement, not passed it, but our president, Father Graham, issued the first welcoming statement to LGBTQ plus people at Xavier, teachers, parents, alumni, students, everyone. And so, I got involved there, and I also then kind of started learning about Cincinnati. And at the time, we were called the most anti-gay city in the country, because back in 1993, or actually 1992, our city council, under the leadership of Mayor Roxanne Qualls, passed an inclusive non-discrimination policy that said you can't discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation or transgendered status, which is the wrong word. It's gender identity, but that's what they used back then, and it was wrong. Voters in 1993 repealed that and wrote discrimination into our city charter and said that LGBTQ plus people cannot be considered protected class for any non-discrimination law. And so when I got here, as a gay man, this was a city that was like, if you're gay, you're going to leave here. You're going to move to somewhere else because this is not a city that welcomes you. And in fact, they wrote that we don't welcome you into the city's constitution. But it didn't scare me away. And so I went to Xavier, and then I met a guy named David Crowley when he was running for council in 2001, and volunteered on his campaign, and then interned at his office. And then I went to law school and then continued working for him and ran his campaign in 2005, was his third of 4 campaigns for council. And then, yeah, that was my entry into like local politics. Just this guy, excuse me, and David, David was this guy who had spent his life in the military, in the Peace Corps, and had only come back to his hometown, Cincinnati, to run the family business, Crowley's Pub in Mount Adams. Mm-hmm. And so, he was retired and he wanted to give back. He wanted to give back to the community. And so that's why he ran for council. I'm not sure exactly how old he was, but he was older and had grandkids. And he also had 4 kids, and 2 were gay and 2 were straight. And remember, this was 20 years ago. And Dave, from day one, was like, I love all of my kids the same. And I remember he would tell this joke, one of my gay son is kind of an asshole, but that I don't care that he's gay. And so, it was this kind of grandfather figure to me who was inspirational. And so it really kind of was my enter to local politics.
And, and Charmaine and I discussed this a little bit yesterday of how, even going back even farther, when she was starting out in her career at the sheriff's department in the early 80s, and with, under Simon Lease and all the kind of the craziness that went on in the 80s and the 90s here, and we became kind of renowned, unfortunately, for that type of thing. But yet we've come so far, I think, in a way, a short time, but by another measure, quite a long time. You've been on council going on a decade now, along with who all came in 2011, PG and Yvette Simpson, and there was this kind of younger progressive wave that swept in.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, in 2011, there was no open seats on city council. So every person who was not an incumbent was hoping to unseat someone who was on council. And, PG, who I love, who's a great friend of mine now, he was like the front runner because he has a family that's, a historic Cincinnati family, and he was raising obscene amounts of money, which is awesome. And, people were like, well, if anyone is going to unseat one of the incumbents, it's going to be PG. And that was true, by the way. And then Yvette and I, and others, Nicholas Holland, and there were others, were all running as progressive Democrats. But many people didn't think we had a shot. They liked us. They thought, oh, they'd be great. Maybe they run a couple times and they're going to win. But no one really thought we could really win that year. Because unlike the next council election, where there's going to be at least five open seats, there were none. And so, we ran this kind of campaign that we believed in, and we ran a hard campaign, but no one expected us to even come close to winning. And so we actually unseated 4 incumbent council members. So the non-incumbents were PG, Yvette, me, and Christopher Smitherman, unseated 4 incumbent council members. It was a shock. And, this was almost a decade ago. And nowadays there's so many, and this is awesome, openly LGBT people running and winning, United States senators, people maybe going to be vice president. But back then, they were like, you're 30 years old, you're not from here, and you're openly gay. Like, and I will add in that I'm a vegetarian, and I was driving a smart car. Like, they were like, Cincinnati is not going to accept this guy, and so we shocked a lot of people. We ran an amazing campaign. John Harmon, who still works for me today, ran an amazing campaign and broke through. And thanks to David Crowley and his widow, Sherry Crowley, for helping in the campaign ads. But, it was an incredible, incredible victory. And, the first openly gay person elected in our entire city, which, is more, it was amazing for me, but it says so much more about our community, that how far we've come, that if you have good ideas and you work hard, that we don't care if you're LGBT. We don't
Right.
care, about who you love.
Yeah, and so thinking back to those times, it was really an exciting time in the city because I think there was this just kind of an air, kind of an energy. I mean, coming out of the '90s and the 2000s, and of course we had very challenging times in Cincinnati going back to 2001 and the civil unrest that we had and everything that came out of that. And many of the challenges that led up to that, there have been a lot of changes, but many of the same challenges remain. But nevertheless, that was the time when having moved to the region in 2003,
Right.
and subsequent to that kind of 2005 time frame when Mayor Mallory was elected, there was just kind of this energy, and you could kind of sense that we were on the verge of this renaissance. And for me, that's when kind of coming full circle, having as a young boy lived close to downtown Cleveland in an urban setting, and really piqued my interest. And so we met. I had not moved into the city yet. I was still living in Mason, and I
Yeah.
remember to this day it was Cinco de Mayo
Yeah.
in front of Nada, where they have
That's-
out there on the plaza. They have their little celebration, and I just happened to be down here hanging out, whatever day of the week it was, and there was some stuff going on, so I was hanging out, and a mutual friend introduced us and said I was not active in politics at all at the time, and introduced us and said, "This is my friend Chris, who's running for council," and I thought that was pretty cool. I'd never met somebody who was running for council in a major city like this before. And then, throughout that summer, we kind of connected. I went to my first ever political event, was a
yeah.
fundraiser of yours that you had somewhere in Hyde Park, I think on Hyde Park Square. And I wrote a
Okay.
check for $25, and that was my first political contribution ever. I gotta get sucked into it, and everything. But that was kind of my entree through you, and then following you introduced me to Sherry Crowley, who was my first realtor here and helped me buy the condo where I'm sitting at today. I can't believe it's been almost a decade here now. And then, and for myself, got super engaged in just kind of civic life here in the city. And then, a whole other year up until the election and 18 months from when we met to when the election actually was. That was
Yeah.
just an exciting time, and you could kind of feel that energy. And people forget we were on 2 year, or council was on 2 year
Right.
terms back then, and that's how you ended up with 10 years. And so it was 2 years, and so you finished out that 2 years, and you got grandfathered in and could do two more 4 year terms. But what was your sense back at that time in terms of that? Did you sense that same kind of energy for the city in general?
So we met through Candace Klein, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because Candace was my best friend at the time. We're still friends, but Candace has moved all over the country, and so it's been hard to be best friends, but we're still friends. And it's interesting because David Crowley and Candace Klein are really the people who introduced me to the people who are my closest kind of friends and family at this point. So shout out to Candace for doing that. Um, no. Back in 2000, 2000, and 2010, 2011, when I was running, the city was in a much different place. I bought my condo in Over the Rhine in 2004, uh, and I was still in law school. And my parents, who I think are on here, my grandmother died. My grandmother, Ruth, died, and I inherited $10,000. And I shouldn't have been able to get a loan because I was just like working as an intern in a law office. But I put a $10,000 down payment on my house and got a loan. And my parents were like, "You're literally throwing your inheritance away because
Hmm.
this neighborhood was so bad." And it was. I mean, my car was broken into 3 to 4 times a year. And it was just no. So fast forward to 2010 when I started running for council, and no, Over the Rhine was nothing like it is today. I mean, I think Senate may have opened in Lavomatic in 2010-11-ish,
Yeah.
but that was the only restaurants that were even open. Was first it was Lavomatic, John Rivera's Lavomatic, and then Senate. Um, and we were like, oh my God, we have to go to these places like every night to help them survive. So Over the Rhine has experienced this incredible renaissance very fast. And it's thanks to 3CDC and Steve Leeper. They are not perfect, but buildings were falling into the streets. Like
Mhm.
At one point, 50,000 people lived in Over the Rhine. Even today, only like 6 or 7 thousand live here. But a decade ago, it was maybe 2 to 3 thousand. And so you had this neighborhood where 50,000 people used to live in the buildings that supported it, and you had only 2 or 3 thousand people. So these buildings were all vacant and they were all falling into the street. And 3CDC, came along and through public and private partnerships, brought them back to life. And you know, as I said, no one's perfect, but without 3CDC, we could have seen more and more of these buildings just have been torn down because they were unsafe.
Well, and I agree with that. And I think, as time marches on, people sometimes lose, you forget actually how things were. And so moving in here in 2010, you're absolutely correct. I remember Senate had just opened, Lavomatic was there. And the Lackman was just about to open, I think, when I moved in. And at the time, from my patio, I could see the Lackman. Because the
Right.
old Mercer building in the garage wasn't even here. It suffered through that for 2 years under construction. And if you
Right.
look at some of the photos back then with just the boarded up buildings and different things, we were experiencing displacement by mere virtue of the fact the disinvestment that had gone on for decades. And you're right, the buildings were crumbling to the ground, and we had tumbleweeds and an occasional bullet flying down Vine Street, and that was about the extent of it. So I think today it's kind of easy to take this for granted, but at that time it was not a given. I heard the same things in 2010 because I was one of the original, owners of my building that was, half empty at the time, and people were telling me because I was this cop in Mason, dude, you are out of your mind. You're going to get killed and lose all your money. And for the first 2 years, I remember I would have the bar stocked up here, and I could even get people to stop down for free alcohol to come visit because they were going to get killed if they came here, they thought.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to look back now and say, well, this and that, and it's $1 million condos and all of this, which, maybe to a degree.
It's like
But,
0.0005% that are
right.
500, $600 million. This is still a low income neighborhood. I mean, the majority of people who live in Over the Rhine are low income.
Well, and so again, I think that kind of gets glossed over. From if I stand out here at the corner of Vine and Mercer, I can see 6 or 7 low-income buildings that have remained that way. And Model Group has been, is one of those owners that has done a good job in maintaining those properties and keeping them for lower-income folks. And I think that was always the goal, and it's a hard needle to thread. But
Yep.
I think always the goal was to have it be, where there's a mix of folks and a mix of different backgrounds, and you can't just have it be a concentrated poverty. There are just many bad outcomes of that as to the other degree. So I think going forward, that's our challenge to continue to do that, not only here but other neighborhoods, and make a city and the neighborhoods be as welcoming and available to to everyone and to the best that we can. So,
Yes.
yeah,
So just one, because I always push back on this gentrification argument. Yes, there are instances in Over the Rhine where low income people have lived in buildings, that buildings have then been converted to higher end condos. It is probably 1% of what has happened in Over the Rhine. 99% of what happened is you taking a building that is completely abandoned and falling into the street and likely would need to be raised, and then you turn them into apartments or condos. And some of those apartments and condos are low income. As you said, the Mono Group does a great job. We just did a project incentive for 3CDC to turn low income. So, yes, there are examples of people being low income people being moved out of Over the Rhine, but it is like 1% of the 100% of the 99% of people who actually are not being displaced. So this idea that Over the Rhine has completely been gentrified is just not true. I mean, there are services and restaurants that all people can afford.
well, and maybe a great example of that, the greatest example is Tucker's, right? That's
Right.
been here forever, an iconic institution, and I think that moving forward, and we could touch on here in a little bit, coming up to the present day, how we'll see what this business model is for the bars and restaurants and the service industry going forward, coming out of COVID-19 and coronavirus. Will people continue when the kind of the smoke clears to go out to the same degree? Will we see a shift here in in retail? There's an argument to be made that we were starting to get oversaturated a little bit with the bars and restaurants anyway. I don't think we've had maybe the influx of neighborhood services that we'd like to see, but it's hard to support that as well. So we'll see about that. Are you coming back?
Yeah, sorry.
You got tired.
It's getting darker outside. It's getting darker outside, so I just wanted to turn the light up a little.
Oh, gotcha. So anyway, so we'll see what transpires with that. But one of the things, and being close to politics here in the city, and having run in 2017, but just kind of following your career and others. Technically, Cincinnati City Council is a quote unquote part-time job.
Right.
I don't know that you can really do the job and give it justice, doing it in a part-time way. I don't know if it's even possible. But it's very stressful, especially these days with social media, the attacks and the personal attacks that you can. And again, Charmaine and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, where you open yourself up to this. I know that you've seen it, and not only on social media, but some of the crazy emails that come into the office. Just vile stuff. And disagreeing with somebody on a policy perspective is one thing, and just being cruel to people is something else. What would you, in 10 years to go through that? I mean, it's a long, it's a long time. Let's be honest. And so, do you feel like you've gotten, in terms of like energy level, all of that? How has that played out over the course of 10 years as you're kind of winding down now and you're going to be term limited out in 21?
Yeah, so not till 2022, January of 2022.
Right, the election's in 21, right?
That's right. I can tell you it's not easy, and I won't lie that sometimes it gets to you, which is exactly what those people want to do. But I have a pretty thick skin, and I know who I am, and I know what I stand for, and how hard I work. And so, I've always been one of those people that when people say you can't do something or that you're not good enough, like that is such a big motivator for me to prove them wrong. And so, I've tried to use all of the hate, and I'm telling you, it is daily. Twitter is so toxic. And it is mean-spirited at its worst, but really I've tried to use it as fuel to work even harder and to do even more. So that's not saying that sometimes it doesn't get to you, and knowing that it gets to my mom or my parents, that's more, that hurts more than probably anything. But look, you survive, and I have a thick skin, and I know who I am, and I have a small group of friends that I completely trust, and that I am able to be my full self around. And so, I think it has caused Craig and I to stay at home more, which is not a great thing, but I think it has caused us because, we don't want to go out and put ourselves in a position where someone can strew things the wrong way or use it against us. And so we're careful when we go out. But we've developed a very strong group of core friends that, we can have fun with and we can be completely honest with. But politics today is not healthy. And the fact that people are so divisive and so personally mean is just not okay. And it starts with our president. I mean, regardless, as you said, regardless of where you stand on issues with Donald Trump, how he acts and treats people is just not okay. And like anyone that thinks it is or defends him, it's just, I do not understand how people who truly care about their kids and know that the president of the United States is the highest position in the world can defend someone who acts and treats people the way he does. I mean, it's just not okay. And, that leadership, or whatever you would call it, boils down to every anonymous person on Twitter, every person that, will send you an email, which they don't send their actual name, and they're just mean. And that's why on Twitter, you can do like your main tweet that you kind of shows up at your first one. Mine is always, you need to calm down from Taylor Swift. Like, just calm down. Like, we can disagree on the streetcar. It's fine. I probably understand all of your arguments against the streetcar. I get it. But like, you don't have to say awful things about me as a person.
Right.
But it's what part of what I signed up for, and so I have to take it, and I do. So yeah.
So, and that, I think that brings up a good point, especially today, with everything that's going on in these kind of uncharted waters for all of us, really. I think if anything brings that more into light in just in terms of, how can we just be nicer to one another? People are
Right.
under a lot of stress now. There's a lot of anxiety. We don't know what the future holds, and I think generally speaking, as a rule, if people don't have a clear path of what the future is, that just creates this innate anxiety. And so, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know, and I sense, and I've talked to people that said, I would never run for any kind of a elected office, even on some low level, just because even at a local politics, let alone a state or national level, you just open yourself up in your life, and people are digging all into your background and all looking for anything to attack you with. And so, a lot of people say it's just not worth it. I'm not going to subject myself and my family to that.
First of all, I think that local politics is the most important politics of all.
Mm-hmm.
So in the state government and the federal government, first of all, if you even get a hearing on one of your proposed legislation, that's a success. In local government, not only can we get things done, but it's what affects your lives on a daily basis. So
Right.
roads, health, parks, recreation, like what local governments do is it truly the basic fundamental parts of how we live. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think that local government's the most important in some ways. I mean, we all care about going to wars, but for the most Americans, wars do not affect them personally. I mean, there are absolutely these Gold Star families and families of veterans that it totally affects personally. But for most of us, local government is what affects us the absolute most.
And even down to in certainly in cities smaller or towns, villages smaller than Cincinnati, it's like, yeah, I want to get a speed hump on my street or a stop sign or something. It's it's things that impact us just on a daily basis. So I think that's a great point. Just looking at some of the comments here real quick. So I got my dad on Facebook now. Rev Ron is on Facebook, just so he can tune into these. So he's
I really
tuning
enjoyed
in.
Ron.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, he was the guinea pig for doing these, and so a lot of people really enjoyed that conversation. So we hope to. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Rev Ryan. Steve is on. Your dad is on. So that's cool. Where did I find a barber open? Steve. This is a do-it-yourselfer. I haven't paid for a haircut since like '92. However, I will say Chris's new haircut is pretty darn close.
So this is the shortest I've ever been. So yesterday, I guess, my hair, I hadn't had a haircut in like a month, and it was like super long, and it was driving me insane. So our niece works at Great Clips when they're not closed, and so I met her at my mother-in-law's house yesterday, and I was like, just take it short. I'm like, because I probably won't get another one for a month. I'm like, so this is like the shortest haircut I've ever had. My dad, they said I look like someone that needs to have like an AK-47 or something. But this is the times we're living in, and I almost was like, just shave it all off.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for that, Not everybody can pull that trick off.
Unlike you.
But anyway, yeah. So Stephen Olhorn's on here. Steve's a good friend of mine, and he's talking about how the energy was, and maybe we can get some of that back. I think we lost a little bit we kind of had a little downslide, and now we'll see what I sense kind of a resurgence now. I think we're going to after this 21 election. there's been some challenges on council as a whole, and of course we're going to have a new mayor regardless. The mayor is term limited out, and I think the mayor has been, along with our governor, has gotten a lot of kudos and well deserved on the handling of the current crisis. But nevertheless, there's going to be I think the cities and really across the country, the states and the cities have bled on this, but I think we've done a great job here in Ohio and Cincinnati under very challenging times. But nevertheless, as you mentioned, there's going to be, a big wave of turnover on council. There's going to be a new mayor. And so I think, and then coming out of this, hopefully most of this, or hopefully all of the smoke will have cleared from this current crisis. And I think we have a real opportunity to kind of have a breath of fresh air and turn the page going forward in Cincinnati and really get this new decade off after this rough start and really do some good work and have some fun as well and do some good things and kind of recapture that energy. It's just kind of the sense that I get. So hopefully that's the case. And then
this next council, like in some ways I wish that I would be running for this next council instead of the council I've been on for the last since 2013.
Well, here's the thing now. So in the time you start out 2-year terms, we went to 4-year terms, and before we even really had a full grasp on that, and all of a sudden we're back to 2-year terms again. Yeah. And so yeah, technically, I mean, everybody that's coming off in next year or at the beginning of 22 can come back. You only have to wait 2 years, you can come back. So we'll see what we'll see. And I'm going to ask you. Hold that thought, because I'm going to ask you what the future's going to hold if we have any insights on that. And then Parker, my buddy Parker Pollock mentions that there's a lot of talk on the west side and Price Hill in particular, and I have a special love in my heart for Price Hill. I broke open my little personal piggy bank and have invested up there. It was the same thing when I bought a house there in 2015, and the people that were telling me I was crazy for buying an OTR in 2010 told me I was absolutely insane for buying a house in Price Hill in 2015. Right. But I think at this point people see that this is kind of the transition of how things go, but I understand it. 30 years of disinvestment in a neighborhood, and you have grandpa that's lived in his house for 40 years and it's worth less. A few years ago the prices prior to the current condition, started to percolate up, but they were coming from a very small base and neighborhoods. I think most people know that in Cincinnati, our council members are all at large. Right. And so you represent not just OTR in downtown, but the entire city. And so, and it's understandable that folks in Price Hill that have grown up there and their families are from there, and they've experienced this, and this neighborhood suffered greatly out of the 2008 real estate crash. And we had these out-of-town investors coming in, buying up houses, real estate investment trusts and other things, and still foreclosed properties all over the place. We have thousands on the west side of Cincinnati. Right. And so when we talk about, real estate and that investment, those dollars, there's a lot of room. This was a city overall that was over 500,000 population. Now we're right around 300. We've started slowly climbing since 2012.
We're at more than 300. The 2020 census will show us that we're more than 300 for sure.
Good. But the point being, we've got, a city that with infrastructure, streets and everything that was built for 500, and now we've got some, smaller percentage than that. So there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for investment still. But this notion that, that OTR was emptied out and everybody shipped up there, I think is just a misguided notion. It kind of caught on in the just kind of the common
point for people to say that OTR was gentrified or is, and there is some truth to that, but it's not the entire story. Like it's not the entire story.
It's not. And of course, neighboring us, our neighboring community is the West End. Again, another tragic story, which there was mass displacement in the West End.
That's certainly gentrification. Honestly, much worse than OTR. The West End, the fact that FC Cincinnati, whose primary target audience is white, younger people, have now taken over the West End, demolished significant, probably the most historic church in our city, and also now putting this massive stadium in our historic black neighborhood And the fact that the city gave billionaires money, tens of millions of dollars to subsidize it, that is the biggest embarrassment sham in a long time, probably since the Bengals.
So just briefly on the history of that, we saw I-75 urban renewal come through. It was known as, a ghetto, and we had to move the folks out of there, and that happened in the 60s and 70s, and it probably led to much of the civil strife that we had during those times when families were displaced to Avondale and Walnut Hills and other places. And we've seen that continue on, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually, just to touch on Parker's point, we also had Laurel Homes, some of the kind of the high-rise towers where the notion was for many years to just kind of warehouse poor folks. Right. And then with the advent of the Section 8 program, with vouchers and such, and those many of the towers, there's a couple still standing, but many were demolished, and the folks were given Section 8 vouchers, and generally, my sense is directed to the west side. In your more wealthy neighborhoods, it just didn't have, in Hyde Park, Section 8 vouchers being accepted. And so, in my view, that was much of the history that led to that, that the gentrification story in OTR was maybe tangential to that, but that was the real issue. But you actually voted against the stadium deal for FC Cincinnati. Is that correct?
And I did, and it was a 5-4 vote. And let me just tell you, because this is importance of voting. So in 2017, our last city council election, the difference between the 9th and 10th place was several hundred votes. And so Jeff Pastor came in 9th. And by the way, I've learned to love Jeff Pastor as a person. I really do. I think he's a good guy. But in a matter of 200 or 300 votes, Michelle Dillingham, who came in 10th, would have been on council and not Jeff Pastor. She would have voted against the deal. All of our split votes would have been changed. So the importance of voting in local elections and off years, I mean, it literally depends on a couple hundred people in our city. So yes, I voted against it, but it was a 5-4 split vote. Joining me were Greg Landsman, PG Sittenfeld, and Tamai Denard, who's no longer on council. We voted against the deal, but the majority passed it.
So that's an interesting point that you bring up, and we see invariably. I thought myself, being involved in the 2017 election cycle, coming out of 2016, and with 45 being elected, there was this energy. I was there with you and Yvette in the Women's March, 7,000 or 8,000 people, how many ever we had for that. And so my sense was, and I think the general consensus was, that there was going to be this kind of, groundswell of energy going into the 2017, and at the end of the day, it turned out it was the same 27% voter turnout that we invariably get every, in every city election. And you're absolutely right. It was 228 votes, I think, for Michelle, that difference. And so you're talking a couple of votes per precinct in the city. And it just really highlights, as people say, wow, my vote doesn't count. And there have been other examples of that, of some very close elections we've had since that time.
1,400 votes difference between Chris Sports and me. So
right.
Yes, I mean, and I'm sure there's people watching this that didn't vote in 2017, and shame on them. Like, we seriously need to shame them. Like, if you care about whatever issue it is you care about, it was affected by you not voting.
And that 9th slot can take a 5-4 council, either way for years. And so you have a couple of votes that really can change the entire trajectory of the outcome of the city. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. You don't realize it at the time. Another one that comes to mind, because I was active in the with our judicial slate in Hamilton County in 2018, Judge Baradon, won by 200 and some votes, very, very close. So, I mean, that's just another example. Jessica Miranda, I think, was very close in her election for state rep. And so we see this, and even the presidential election, right? I mean, a couple of thousand votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, changed the whole thing.
Literally
Gore v. Bush.
60,000 voters in 2016 changed whether Hillary or Donald Trump was going to win. Like 10,000 in Michigan, 10,000 in Wisconsin, 10,000 in Pennsylvania. And that's why all of these national polls about Trump or whatever, it doesn't matter. There's
Right.
like 3 or 4 states. That's what matters. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and then maybe Florida or Ohio, but probably not. So like how we win is how well we do in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Well, and it's one of our challenges. And when I say our, I mean kind of the progressive team, right? Our turnout numbers tend to be lower. We see it in the city where the deeper, the more the central spine of the city, from downtown OTR up through Clifton, kind of over to North Side, and up through Avondale and on up to Bond Hill and Roselawn. That's kind of central swath of the city is the deepest blue. And then it gets progressively lighter. And of course, over the years, the city has gotten more and more blue, less and less red. But then you look at the voting percentages that are in the inverse of that. So here, even downtown, we're having like between 6 and 10%, voter turnout for the city elections, and places in Price Hill and Hyde Park, are having 40, 45, 48% in the highest precincts, which isn't great, isn't amazing, but it's a lot more than 5 or 10%. And so I think that's one of the challenges that we face, that really, and a lot of these folks are, and there's challenges. Of course, we have a team in place that makes it harder for people to vote. There's things that we could be doing, on a statewide basis, voting by mail or, motor voter and all registration, all these types of things. And so there's systemic imbalances, but at the end of the day, these handful of votes can make the difference. And it's typically the older folks who turn out and vote every single time, and so therefore maybe their voices are kind of outsized even to what to the population of the city. But it's interesting when you look at those numbers, and so we'll see if it kind of reverts to that mean in 21. But speaking of that, so we're kind of up to the current day now. What is your personally, what do you think when you roll off a count? Are you going to ride off into the sunset, never to be seen again? You have a love for Latin culture, similar to myself, and you've spent some time on vacation. And the wedding was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, a beautiful town on the west coast of Mexico. So you're going to disappear down there? We never see you again, or what's going to happen? What does the future hold?
Well, who knows? I mean, so I don't know the answer to that question, and I have like 17 months to figure that out, more than that. So I have no plans to run for elected office again.
Wait, now you're saying no plans. Of course, plans can change.
So, yeah, I mean, I think,
but it's not a goal of yours at this point. Where yes, I'm gonna, I can't wait to run for Secretary of State in Ohio or something else like that.
I doubt that I will ever run for office again. I doubt that. So I will never say no to anything. But first of all, you have to think about 2 things. Do you want to do the job, and can you get elected? And look, I have no interest. As much as I hate dusty roads, I don't want to be county auditor. Like, I have no desire to be county auditor. And the jobs that I would be interested in, they're unwinnable because of gerrymandering. And I have no interest in, being a state rep or state senate, because the Democrats are in the supreme minority. So all you do is drive to Columbus every day to, complain about what the Republicans are doing, because our politics are so divisive. So no, and I have no intention of ever being county commissioner. I mean, it's not a job I would ever want. I want to do something that I'm excited about and that I want to come to work to every day. And right now, there's no elected office that I can both be excited about and win. And also, I've spent my life, I will have spent a decade of my life in a city council member, which, look, I'm not like fighting to put food on the table, but I'm also not, this isn't like a rich person salary, and so, I think I want to do something that both excites me, that I can be successful at, that I can make money at, because, our family matters as well. And I went to school all the way till I was 25 through law school, and I have student loan debt. So, but what you said is that, yes, what our ideal scenario, Craig, my husband, has a landscape company, and so he doesn't work much in the winter, is that we would be able to live in Puerto Vallarta January, February, March of every year. But look, I don't know what kind of job that would allow me to do that. So, I have a long time, almost 2 years, to figure out what I'm going to do next. But it's going to be something that I'm passionate about, that I will be successful at, and that I can make some money at. And so, if people have suggestions, if people have opportunities, let me know. Uh,
Get your LinkedIn up to date or whatnot. Interesting. So we don't know. So it's kind of up in the air at this point. And I think you brought up a good point that maybe something that doesn't get talked about very much. We mentioned how council is a part-time job per se. And there's been some talk because of the city's current budget issues and so forth that
council.
Wait, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
And I've had 2 other jobs while I've been on city council, but it really is a full-time job. How they say it's a part-time job is that we get the months of July and August. We only meet once 1 week of that month, of those 2 months. So that's why they say it's a part-time. The rest of the year, we're working full-time. But yes,
right, and you've got the actual meetings that people see are really a small percentage of the time that's spent in the evenings. And so, for example, we see our good friend Greg Landsman. Greg is somebody who's really out and active, in particular, among others. But the community meetings and the community councils and such are in the evenings. So you're doing that. You're answering emails, phone calls. There's stuff going on all the time. The city manager's sending messages out of things that are going on. If there's a shooting of some kind or something like that, you're getting those notifications and maybe responding. So in that sense, it's not a part-time job. Certainly, it's all day. The media, is always engaged.
As Craig would tell you, I spend most evenings up to 11 o'clock at night on the phone with journalists or the city manager or department heads. And then as soon as I wake up, I have 12 text messages, that I'm looking at that have something to do with the job. It's a 24-hour job.
And so, I have heard there's been a notion out there, council salary is something like $65,000 a year, which it's not horrible, but nobody's getting rich off of that. And
exactly.
And so I've heard some kind of scuttlebutt, other than under the current budget crisis, everybody's kind of been asked to take their office budget, take a pay cut, and everybody has been asked to kind of step up, and you have done that as well as others. But maybe it's a part-time job. Maybe it should be cut to save money. And my position is no, because especially then it becomes a job that only the wealthy can afford to take on, right?
Exactly right.
If you're a wealthy person, or you have other businesses, or come from family money, or whatever the case may be, you can afford to take on this more or less volunteer role. And so I'm not saying that necessarily that the wage should be increased for city council. I don't know when the last time it was. It's been a long time.
Decades.
But really, that makes it feasible for somebody that doesn't come from means to be able to afford to take that job and to be able to live and put food on the table, given the fact that it actually is, for all practical standpoint, a full-time job.
Well, and it's interesting. You're exactly right. And we talk about our boards and commissions because we appoint probably close to 1,000 people to boards and commissions who make important decisions every year. And we often talk about the lack of diversity. And low-income people are especially not part of these boards and commissions because they're unpaid, And so low-income people who should be represented are not, because they can't afford to spend, 4 or 5 hours a week on a board and commission.
Right.
And so, people may think, well, it makes sense to cut the salary or not pay people. Well, then you're excluding a whole segment of our population. And government we have a democracy. It's supposed to be representative of every type of person in our city. And if you take away that money, you're excluding a lot of people because they just can't afford to spend their time not making money.
Well, and that's a great point, and I think one that's easy to kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to. And I think on this issue and a lot of others, that if you actually connect the dots, that you see that the actual end result might be counterintuitive to what you're at the surface you think it might be. I got another comment here from my good friend and the dentist to the Cincinnati Stars,
Dr.
Dr.
Love,
Dr. David Beck. Love you too, Dr. Beck. If anybody's in the market for a dentist, Pierce Beck Dental is the spot. They got an office now. I don't know if they're trying to leave us eventually, and with a new office up in Mason. I need you down here, down at the downtown office, Doc. He's a vet's dentist as well. And as a matter of fact, I might add this. Dr. Beck was my very first campaign donation to my 2017 council campaign. I was just getting finished up with my cleaning, and he actually walked into the office there. And this was November of 2016, right after the 2016 election, and wrote me my very first check, and that was very special. I will never forget that. Got me off to a great fundraising start, and away we went. So, we'll look forward to that again.
Shout out to him.
Dr. Beck's the man. He's cool, and he's like an actor too. He's a big Hollywood star. He's got all these movie parts that he gets with all the movies that come through town. But
wow.
Man of many talents. But on that note, what do you kind of see now? So the city is facing a financial crunch, as many of us are personally. Many small businesses are. Our earnings tax, rolls have just kind of come to a halt here. We'll see. Hopefully, we get the state money and the federal money that we've been calling for. But what do you see now as the real challenges? We've got maybe 4 or 5 minutes here to kind of wrap things up. What do you see going forward, and how do we come out of this current situation, or is there any clarity at all on this right now?
So our tough times, regardless of when we're able to congregate together, are not going to stop. I mean, the hit on this economy, and look, the priority should be the health of our citizens, the health of families, and not the economy. But once that fear and things have changed, the economy is going to just severely suffer. So we know that we were actually projecting a surplus. So we're on a fiscal calendar year, so we balance our budgets by June 30th of every year. We were actually projecting a surplus of about 20-something million dollars. We're now projecting a deficit that we have to close by June 30th of about $25 million. And then next year, we're projecting a deficit of $80 million. So unlike the federal government, the state and local governments, we have to balance our books. We can't just print money new. And so our operating budget for the city is about $350 million. So when you consider cutting 25 and then 80 million, that's like almost a third of everything we do. And 70% of what we do, almost 70%, is police and fire. And so when you're cutting almost a third of our budget, I mean, it's going to be devastating. We've passed the ability to borrow up to 150 million, but look, even if we were able to borrow 150 million, I don't think we're going to be able to. I think PNC is going to borrow us 50 million. That's a one-time thing. That's not like 150 million a year. So the results of this pandemic are going to be devastating for the future of the city. And I mean, look, this is the city. I mean, I saw Lauren Ottman was on here earlier. The small businesses, I mean, yes, there's some relief. There's this bailout if you keep your employees on. But I mean, the effects of this are going to be felt for decades to come. And it's not good. It's not good.
Well, and I don't think at this point everybody's had an opportunity to. I try to the degree possible, kind of take the big picture and try to, game plan out a few steps ahead, which is why since March the 11th, I've been calling for, direct payments to individuals, small businesses, and local governments from the feds who do have access to the printing presses. Cut the red tape, cut the bullshit, get money in people's hands where it makes the most sense and can immediately be put to use. And so, yesterday I was starting to hear some scuttlebutt where the $1,200 is starting to show up in people's accounts, which is great, but it's not nearly enough, and I don't think we have a full grasp yet because people say, cut the fat. We've been cutting the fat for a long time. I mean, in the city of Cincinnati, our earnings tax is 1.8% after you subtract out the 0.3 to Metro. Cleveland and Columbus are at 2.5%. Besides what the common, theme is out there, the city has been running a very lean operation that has spared police and fire. So even if you close down every rec center and pool, even if you close down everything else, public health is part of that, which we see is very important now. There's not that much excess left. It's kind of all at the margins.
So just
and it leaves police and fire, and that's where we're at.
So for the last decade, we've had anywhere from $12 to $60 million deficits every year. We have 19 city departments. Police and fire are 2 of them. We've never cut police and fire. We've cut every single other department in these $12 to $60 million deficits every year. And so you have departments that are already decimated. Like they do not function in any way how they should. And now we're going to be looking at cutting 1/3 of the city workforce. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, it's very scary.
Well, and so we'll see, I guess is the best answer. I wish there was some magic bullet solution right now. There isn't. Hopefully we get some of these dollars.
Someone just said, why don't FC give back the money that we gave them, the billionaires, to build a stadium? I couldn't agree more. Like in these times, billionaires should give back the taxpayer money to subsidize their, hundreds of $million stadium. That would be the right thing to do. Will they do it? I doubt it.
Well, in any event, we're going to be looking at some very, and honestly, I was running, trying to be sitting up there on the dais alongside of you, and
yep.
For now,
not alongside me, but you will be there in a couple years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that confidence. Hopefully, you've solved all the problems by the time I get there, and then we can start having some fun and getting some stuff done. But anyway, so after these 9 years that you've been in office, this last year, I think is going to be, when you look at all of this time, these are going to be some of your most critical moments and critical decisions coming up. And so we'll see how all of that pans out. It's very challenging. And again, a lot of it, there's just not a lot of clarity yet. And we'll muddle through it. And what choice do we have? We're going to come out the other side. In my view, no matter what happens, and Godspeed to everyone that is there making these decisions now that will impact us all, that we come out of this stronger, and as resolute as ever going forward. And I think that's part of this whole notion of, how do we connect? How do we stay together? How are we kinder and gentler to one another? Because we're all facing these problems that are very very substantial. So thank you for your service to the city of Cincinnati over these past years, and upcoming in this very challenging next year ahead. And thank you for this kind of open and honest. And that's what I want to do with these videos, is just have not just to kind of allow people to get to know people as people. And where we're coming from, and kind of establish it to the best we can from a distance, these closer bonds and relationships, and understanding where one another comes from. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll let everybody else get back to their regular.
All right, I just want to say one final thing.
No, please go for it.
So I've enjoyed this, and you're one of my best friends, and I think this is awesome what you're doing. I'll just say that this year has been one of the worst years of our lives. Not only are we experiencing this pandemic, but personally, my husband had major spine surgery in January, and has been recovering since then. And then this past Wednesday, our cat daughter of 21 years, Raya.
That's right.
Yeah,
Raya.
And we had not planned on adopting more animal friends, family members into our house.
I don't know about that.
Well, but in a turn of events, a cousin who I just found out was my cousin a couple years ago, his fiance posted that they had a cat who they had rescued, who, before they could get her spayed, had kittens about 1 month ago today. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to pick up our new cat daughters in Louisville, and it's probably one of the most positive, exciting. We're so excited to be new dads of these kittens, and so it's just something positive in our life, and we can't wait to share these kittens with everyone. So we're excited.
Well, I know they started showing up on my phone all of a sudden. The cat pictures showing up. So have you? Do we have names yet? How's that process going to look like?
You know, we both want to meet them first. We have lots of ideas, including, I think it's my favorite, but Craig doesn't like it. Two of our grandmothers, his grandmother, who he was closest to, was named Rosemary. And then my grandmother, who essentially raised me when my mom was working every day, and my parents was named Doe. Her name was Doris, but we called her Doe. So I kind of like the Rosemary and Doe, but Greg Landsman. So as people may know, my favorite movie is A League of Their Own because it has the quote, "It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it." And there's two sisters in that movie named Kit and Dottie. And it's funny because while Raya was our cat daughter that we lost, Craig called her Dottie, which is short for daughter. And so I also like that kind of Kit and Dottie name. So, but we don't know. We have to meet them first, and then we'll decide.
All right. No Tiger King
Well,
references.
our first initial thought was we were going to name them Carol and Karen. So Carol after Carol Baskin from Tiger King, and then Karen after the woman who always asked to talk to the manager at the restaurant. We love that meme. But
All
I don't
right,
think.
so
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll stay tuned for the kid. But there's two cat daughters on the way in the Schultz
Oh my
or
God!
Seelbach Schultz household.
Hold on. Let me show you a photo of them real quick.
Here we
Here's
go.
one of them. Can you see
Oh,
her?
yes.
She's a month old, and so here's the other one. Because we wanted a black cat because most of our cats have been black so far, and we just love them.
Yeah.
So here's the other one. So we have a white or a tiger cat and a black cat. So yeah, they're going to become local celebrities.
I don't know. Josie #CityKitty might have something to say about that. So
We'll have
see. We'll see how it goes. But okay, so we've had some breaking news here, folks. You had to hang in there for the full hour to get the breaking news at the end of the new additions to the Seelbach Schultz household.
We have to, if anyone has suggestions, we have to turn our condo into kitten friendly, which is gonna there's a lot we have to do.
It's a big preparation here. So hit Seelbach up, everybody, if you have house proofing, kitten proofing ideas. But at any rate, thank you for your time. Those hours went very quickly. We have people stuck with us the whole time, so thank you for that. And we'll be back. We'll see. I've got some other irons in the fire here of some great guests we might have on coming up this week. But Chris, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Derek. Love you.
All right. Love you too. Love you a long time. All right. Have a good night. All right. Bye, everybody. Peace, Cincinnati. Love you.